whenever I was overwhelmed and thought I'm never going to make it through this shift. I think back to going back to the floor during COVID and all the things that we had to do. But then those little moments of being able to provide the comfort or just being there and being present and not rushing through, like that'll get you through it. And I think sometimes CNAs, they have the toughest job.
You're listening to Hearts of Excellence, brought to you by Majestic Care, where real stories from long-term care come to life. Today, we're joined by Jordan Vinson, Vice President of Operations for Majestic Care. Jordan started her healthcare career as a CNA, and in one of those twists that feels like it was written only for her. Years later, she walked back into that very same facility as its executive director. What happened in between is a story about staying when it gets hard, choosing people over prestige, and what happens when you fall in love with work you never expected to love. Jordan, welcome to the Hearts of Excellence podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We are so excited for today's conversation. We're chatting a little bit about where you're from, so Kentucky, and talking about the differences and, all of the fun Kentucky stuff. So you'll probably hear that a little bit in this conversation, but let's go ahead and dive into why we're here today. Jordan, you described your move into skilled nursing work as something you unexpectedly fell in love with. Take me back to that first PRN shift around 2010. What did you notice about that environment that caught you off guard?
I noticed, first and foremost, just the relationships with the residents from the start. I had been in hospital work, so it had been, for lack of a better word, kind of like a hospital, just hospital-like factory work, I guess you could say. It was focused on the acute problem, focused on what was going on at that time, and then went to the nursing home, and I can still remember the gentleman, fell in love with his story and interacting with him, and just kind of a mindset change. I looked at more of kind of just, we were treating the whole person. It wasn't just that acute condition or that acute illness, that had been stabilized at that point. Of course, we were still focused on, their well-being, but it was looking at them as a whole, listening to their stories. This particular gentleman didn't have family, so it was kind of, filling that void for him. And, what could we do to lift his spirit? And I had a great connection with him. And of course, there were others, too, but left that day thinking that there's something different here. I feel differently, feel more, I guess, fulfilled, you could say. And, there's a difference here, so that kind of just got me sucked in and never went back.
What's interesting that you bring up, because I did, as a therapist, I did acute care for a little bit, and that is what it is. You just go into acute care and you just literally, you have 3 days, you're just focused on X. There's not really a story. You don't really know what happens. You're hoping that things have played out well for them, but you just don't know.
No, and so task oriented. You got to hang this blood. You've got to give this, give this IV, give this med. The hall that I started at in a nursing home was a rehab to home type hall. So we were doing some of those. We were doing wound vacs, we were doing IVs, we were doing all that, but it was just a different pace, and getting to really learn their stories and just make that connection.
Yeah.
So, and at that point, I had been in ICU. I had done all that stuff, so I was looking for more like, where do I land? Where do I, and it was just making those connections that made it fulfilling, to me.
Yeah, that's really special. I love hearing that. You'd spent years, as you mentioned, in ICU and in med-surg before making that pivot to skilled nursing. What did you have to let go of, or what did people around you say when you chose to stay in long-term care?
I think there's a stigma, maybe not as much now, but, this was many years ago. There was a stigma of that long-term care was for, older nurses or nurses that didn't have the skills, but it wasn't that way. Once I got in it, I realized, this is a specialty as well.
Yeah,
this is just like ICU. This is like, the endo units. This is just like that. There's a whole different skill set, that you have to look for with the elderly, and, signs and symptoms of changes, and, and then just being able to treat them to look at them as a whole. And, you know, the flip side of things, looking at the regulations that we have to follow. You know, I don't think anybody realizes how regulated that, you know, we are. And I always say, you know, when in med surg and in ICU, it was so, you know, just focused on, you know, what's going on. But like, I didn't learn to do probably a thorough skin assessment until I worked in long-term care. I can remember my first admission skin assessment. I thought, I have to write up every single area on the skin. Area. You know, you didn't have to do that in the hospital. No, you know, generalized bruising got you through it, you know, but it's not that way in long-term care. So I learned, you know, more about, you know, wound care for sure in long-term care than I did in the hospital.
Yeah, that's really good insight. And I definitely think it makes you more well-rounded as an individual, because you have to think on your toes all the time. Like, you have to constantly have your eyes down every single hall with maybe like three other, you know, maybe three CNAs, and the doctor's not even there, like in the hospital. Absolutely. Like, you have someone, you can say, you know, room 205 needs someone's stat, but they're not there. So I do think it makes you able to think critically and be like, here's my list of things I have to prioritize today. How do I prioritize them in the order that they need to? And I remember doing admissions on paper, and like, you had to write out all the meds, like acetaminophen. Like,
Absolutely.
that is a very long word to write out by hand. And then you got to write it out twice if one's PRN and one's scheduled. And I mean, you talking about it brings me joy too, because it is a special thing, and there is a stigma. Like, I remember a lot of my folks that I went to college with, or maybe I graduated high school with, you know, they'd go on to work in acute care, be nurse practitioners or whatever. And you're like, yeah, I work in long-term care, you know, and it eventually you're proud of it.
Yes.
Because of, it's not for everyone. Just like, I remember when I did my clinical in OB, I love babies, and that was so beautiful seeing, and I wouldn't enjoy doing that because it's very, like, you just wait. I mean, we love our OB nurses out there, but you just wait. It's like you're just waiting, and they're doing a lot of things the doctors are doing. Yeah. But I just don't, that would not be for me. So everyone has their space.
I think it's amazing. I wish we could just, again, I agree, stigmas, it is shifting, but it hasn't fully shifted. I wish people would fully understand, when you look at clinicians in a skilled nursing facility, long-term care, it is a whole different skill set.
Absolutely.
You know, you talk about someone, and again, I'll use the rehab side. Someone comes in, now hips and knees are of the past. They're no longer, but take our dementia patients, and I always would say, when you have a patient with dementia and you're trying to understand what's going on, their pain, or is it a pain issue? Because they can't verbalize it as much as someone that, like myself, hey, Jordan, I'm in pain. Can I get a pain med? But you have to figure out all those idiosyncrasies. You have to understand who they are as a person to really understand how to deliver care to them as a nurse or a therapist or a dietitian or whoever. And that, to me, is the whole skill set. And again, how do we get our nurses out there passionate to want to work in long-term care versus this image of, well, I just pass pills? No.
Because that is not what it is.
It's not that at all. The psychosocial, there's the medical piece that does go along with it. Filling in the voids that may not be there, whether it's a family disconnect or it's just somebody's lonely or someone's taking their final breath.
Yeah. And, you know, everybody has a story, and, you know, and you have to be, you know, sympathetic with that. But as far as, you know, with this particular gentleman that I was, you know, referring to, it was, you know, well, he had, you know, a bad past with his family. Well, I was fortunate. I didn't care. That didn't matter. You know, I wasn't involved in that. I came in, you know, at the end. So it was kind of like, you know, we had that opportunity to bridge that gap and to be the staff, to be the family that he didn't really have. And, you know, it didn't really matter what he had done in his past. That's not why we were there. So I think that it's just, you know, just so fulfilling, I guess you could say, to everyone involved, you know, to be able to be that piece and to be there with them when they do take their final breath. You know, what an honor, you know, to be able to be the one that's there, comforting them through that and to witness that. And, you know, so it's just, I think it, like I said, it's a specialty unit that I think that doesn't get the attention that's and the recognition, you know, that's deserved.
So I know, like with nurses, you can get a certification for like ortho and for different, is there one for, is it like more geriatric?
I would say there's probably a geriatric maybe. But
I'm curious.
I'm sure there
Stephanie
is.
look into it for us and let us know.
Just out of curiosity, because again, promoting again that it is you're being a therapist, we were always looked at as therapists like you were the ones that couldn't make it in the real world.
Yeah.
You're the one that couldn't do outpatient. You're the one that couldn't do, and it's
true.
like, no, it's more of, I value all my colleagues in the industry, but again, to me, I did outpatient. It wasn't for me.
Yeah.
You would not want me to be your outpatient therapist. I stunk at it. So again, but it's that passion where you find your niche and you find your love in your heart. And that again, but again, how do we keep reaching, especially the younger generations that are coming through nursing school?
Absolutely. I love it. Jordan, you mentioned that gentleman that had such an impact on you. So this question is going to be a little bit similar, but I'm trying to see if there's any more we want to get out of it.
Yeah.
It says, was there a resident or someone early in your long-term care career who showed you what this work could really mean?
There, him, and then there was also a lady that was going through breast cancer that was she was on the unit that I was working. We knew her prognosis wasn't well, but she required a lot of skilled wound care. So that's why she was on the skilled unit. And the time that I spent with her during her dressing changes, that really made a huge impact because, of course, she was in pain. So it was, treating the pain. But then also I got to, learn more about like non-pharmacological interventions, for pain because the pain medications were not, really doing it for her. So it was, kind of the guided imagery and talking through things with her and, just sitting and crying with her too because she knew what was coming. And, it was just seeing that side, the psychosocial side, and being able to support, kind of like, I was saying earlier, the whole person. And then, kind of a mind shift too of, in the hospital when someone passes, a lot of time it's the code situations. It's just those adrenaline, crazy situations. But these situations were more providing comfort in the end and, being there with them and letting them, transition with dignity and comfort. And so she really made a huge impact on me too. So I think probably more just going into the nursing home environment just showed me there's so much more than just medical with a person. There's so much more there that we have to support, especially in the end, in that transition process, spiritual needs, chaplains involving them. It was just treating the whole person, I realized was more kind of my niche just from those two, that impacted me so much.
Absolutely. And I always love seeing the relationships they build with one another.
Yes.
In our communities, they all have their own friend groups and, they truly are. They watch over each other as family, and that's really special that even though they're not confined, we have beautiful outdoor spaces for them. However, the next chapter of their life just looks different for whatever reason that is, but they have that community to rally around them, which is really special to watch how they care for each other. It's like your neighbors. It's their own little neighborhood.
I have people that tell me that, we'll see the things that we do for our residents on social media and like some people that I talk to that are getting, older, they'll say, I want to go to one of your nursing homes. Like it looks fun, and that's awesome to hear that, people see what we're doing. We take them on outings. We do all that. I think it's the stigma's getting better as far as what we do in the nursing home. It's not just a place that you go for your last days. It's now there, people do go home from the nursing homes and, sometimes it's just a short stay, but then also seeing the relationships that they build with each other. And I'll go to facilities and they'll have somebody discharging and the resident's sad because they want to go home, but they're going to miss their friends. And then that to me is like, we've done what we're supposed to do.
Absolutely.
That's awesome to see.
Yeah. Or their family comes to visit and they're like, well, I have bingo at this time, or we have an activity to do at this time. And that's always special to see.
Have you seen the video, Carter?
The Walk to Dime.
Yes. That is, and that's what I thought about when you were talking about the community is, so we have a facility in Kentucky, Carter, and it's just amazing. They did a video. They do a program called Walk to Dine. So it's encouraging all of our residents to go down to the dining room, just like you would do in a restaurant.
And that story, how that came about is awesome to me because Warren and I were just there for a visit.
Yeah.
And we came in and we were like, you can't even walk in this dining room.
Yeah,
it's so packed.
cool.
Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And Ralph was like, this is just what we decided to do. Like, we got them out of the beds and this is what we did.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing to see. But that's how, we were just shocked at there's nowhere to even sit.
Right. Right.
And
It was lively.
yes.
It felt like, it literally reminded me of what going to a restaurant. It's just
Yeah.
lively, people sitting at tables, conversations happening, just like if you walked into a major restaurant and looked around. That's what it looks like. And again, it's their room, as I always say, their room is really their bedroom. And the four walls of their community is becoming their home.
Yeah. It's amazing to see.
Yeah, that was very touching. Okay, next question. You were a CNA at Greenville in the early 2000s, and then you came back as its executive director in 2017. What was it like to walk back through those doors in a completely different role?
Humbling. And very much, I guess, kind of one of those, how did I get here? How did this happen? The crazy thing about that is there was some of the same staff still there. Because,
Wow.
Greenville has a lot of tenured, care team members that have been there. So it was good to see them. And some of them were, I can't believe you're back as my boss, because they had been peers. But it was kind of of course, I was proud, a proud moment. Greenville's always been very highly regarded in the community. So I was proud to do it. But it was also just the ownership piece that was there just from the start because I had been there as a CNA, knew a lot of the staff, knew a lot of the families. I actually had family members that were residents, and then people that I had gone to church with my whole life, that were residents. So that added another layer, I guess, of just ownership for me of, this, I've got to make this great. I mean, it was already great, but I've got to continue this. I've got to, just another level of, I guess you could say responsibility, but also just very, like I said, very humbling. I knew the ins and outs of the facility already. I knew the shower rooms needed work, which we did. We redid all the shower rooms. So, it was like things like that I already knew. I knew a lot of the processes. I knew how the rooms looked. I knew all that. But it was great, and it really, truly from the start just kind of felt like being back home.
Yeah.
Were you in the community and then they tapped you on the shoulder and said, hey, will you become the executive director? Or were you licensed at that point?
I was an administrator at a facility that was an hour from home.
Okay.
And so it was the drive, but I loved that community. We had just had a deficiency-free annual, it was a great little building. And then someone reached out to me and said, hey, this is open. And I thought, man, that would be amazing. It's literally 7 minutes from home, So I applied and ended up getting that role. But it wasn't really like I was looking for anything because to me, an hour drive's not terrible, So, and that community, like I said, had been, it was a great little building, deficiency free, So I had things going pretty well. And then Greenville came open. So it was different to operate in my hometown. I would see families at Walmart, get Facebook messages from people that were, that I knew. But obviously, loved it there, very beneficial to be there. So,
Yeah. Talk about a full circle moment.
yes. And
really
then,
special.
ended up eventually my DNS, who is now the ED, she was also we were CNAs there together. When Shannon was the DNS and I was the executive director, it was funny because we would be like, do you remember back in the days when we would be here as CNAs, together? Who would have ever thought this is how it would end up?
I could just picture you and her like partnering up together.
Yes.
And she's very much, has that similar, like, let's get it done type of approach.
Absolutely.
She's a great person. Jordan, you earned 3 degrees while you were working, raising a family, an associate's, a bachelor's, and then a dual master's in nursing and business. The same year you became executive director. Tell me about a time during that journey that you almost didn't keep going.
There were plenty.
I was saying, there has to be quite a few. That's a lot.
I would say the bachelor's wasn't, and I hate to say not, I mean, it was challenging, but I was a DNS when I was doing that role. And any nurse that has earned their bachelor's will tell you that it's more paper compliance type thing. You know, they'll tell you it didn't really make me a more rounded nurse, I guess, clinically, but the master's was more challenging for me. The nursing part wasn't as challenging. It was the business. But at that point, I had transitioned into an administrator role, and I needed to learn it. You know, there was verbiage being used, and I think, Paul, you've been there, done that. There was verbiage being used that I didn't really understand, and I'm like, I've got to learn this. So the MBA was definitely more challenging, but I guess I think just the determination of, you know, if I'm doing it, I'm going to do it. Like, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to keep going. So there was a lot of 2 a.m. assignments submitted, and, you know, because, of course, first and foremost, I'm a mom, you know, and Maddie, my oldest, she did every sport there was, and I didn't want to miss any of that. So, you know, I'm going to the vehicle, you know, in between softball games and, you know, submitting assignments. And, you know, of course, Jeremy, my husband's always been extremely, you know, supportive of things. So he would have to entertain kids while I was working. But I guess you just put your mind to it and do it, you know. And like I said, with the business, there were so many accounting courses. I think I can remember the managerial accounting that I thought was going to possibly do me in, but got through it, you know. But it was stuff that I knew I needed to learn in order to be successful on the other side, because the nursing stuff I felt like came a lot more natural. But the business I had to work at more, and eventually got there. But it was challenging, to say the least.
So did they do a lot of, so I have my master's in business, my MBA too, and there was a point where I'm like, oh my God, if I have to hear another widget story or automobile, because again, they don't have people come and teach the MBA, at least that I've seen, about healthcare.
No.
I had one professor, he worked in a healthcare system, and he came in and he did the statistics class. But again, I could relate, because he's like, we're looking at average wait times in the emergency room. We're looking at, and I'm like, I can wrap my head around this. But that was probably my biggest challenge, is trying to understand, again, not that you need to know all the business lines, but again, there was not a lot of emphasis in healthcare on the MBA side. It was all manufacturing, widgets. I don't know if that was yours too.
Yeah, mine was like that too. And I would try to, sometimes in order to make it more relatable, like I would try to kind of spin it in my head a little bit. And I found when I did that, I could connect to it and get more into it. But on the surface, sometimes it was, like you said, you know, an automobile or plastics factory or something. And, you know, can't really relate to that. But I would spin it for myself, and, you know, and could do it more that way. Or at that point, I was getting, you know, P&Ls and, you know, financials and stuff. So I would kind of think through, you know, okay, this is what I'm looking at. This is the general ledger. This is the trial balance. This, you know, kind of going through when I was starting to get tools for the financials, I could kind of spin it that way too. But definitely challenging, but I survived.
We're so proud of you. That's incredible. You've held nearly every role in long-term care. CNA, charge nurse, unit manager, director of nursing, administrator, and now you're the vice president of operations for Majestic Care. Is there a role that surprised you the most, or one that changed how you see this work in a way you didn't expect?
I would say one of, I guess, kind of like my first promotion was becoming a staff development coordinator, which
I was also a staff development coordinator.
Which, you know, I guess now is kind of the IPSD role, you know, but 20 years ago, staff development coordinator. And that role really opened my eyes to, I guess, people, because you were responsible for the orientation of everybody, you know, in the facility. And that opened my eyes to, you know, people not necessarily feeling like they're as important as other roles, you know. And of course, nursing is the largest department. I get that. But, you know, housekeeping plays a role in the residents' well-being, you know. So does dietary, so does maintenance, you know. So in that role, I think I really saw that some of these other roles don't feel as important. So that really did shape, like, once I became, a director of nursing or an administrator, involving everybody and trying to empower them. I can remember, fall huddles and talking with staff, talking to the housekeeper. What did you see? What did, and then like at Greenville, when we were trying to get to the 5-star, involving, telling, how dietary even knew, like, okay, this is how close we are. This is what we've got to do, or this is how many falls we've had this month. This is the goal. And Shannon, of course, helped me a ton with that, working with her and, communicating it across the board to everyone. This is our goal. This is where we need to get to, but it was I think that role made it, just really opened my eyes to not everybody always feels included.
Right.
And you're going to have the best outcomes when everybody does have that ownership.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just involving everyone.
Yeah. And it's so helpful for everyone to know what your goals are.
Yes.
Because if they don't,
Mm-hmm.
that's not good. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
Just again, I guess I'm curious to know, because being a therapist, that's how we always felt. Like,
Yeah.
kind of go to your office until we need you.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you cross that bridge? Because again, it's one thing to pull everybody in that's your own staff and make sure they feel connected. But usually most skilled nursing now, it's changed. But back in the day when I would say most nursing homes use contract therapy.
Yeah.
So how did you pull them in?
The therapist directors that we always had and I don't know if it's because it was a small facility, but it just seemed really easy to pull them in, and they would engage with us, and we included them like in morning meeting. I always just had them stay when we reviewed falls. I would have them attend all of our meetings. So I think that just kind of made them feel part of it. They done care plans with us, just including them, and involving them in the actual care, and, asked them about equipment, what type of intervention would you recommend, And then at Greenville also, we always utilized therapy to assist us with restorative, so we always have had restorative there, so that was kind of a bridge too, in keeping them involved. They would help with, the maintenance plans. They would help write those plans. So you really
ingrained the culture. It was a culture.
It was a culture thing, yeah.
There wasn't a wall. There wasn't a barrier. It didn't matter. Anybody who walked through the Greenville doors, the culture was you're part of the whole team.
Absolutely. And that's something I think that I still take a lot of pride in, just getting the feedback from like the mock surveys and stuff. This is, Jackie reached out to me. My team loved being at Greenville, so it's still, just hearing that. I think that it's, Shannon's done a great job of just continuing that.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you it was interesting because I've been with the company 3 years, and the whole 3 years, you guys, when I first started, were the shining star of the company. I mean, truly, we had 39 buildings at the time. Greenville always had the 5-star. You guys were always hitting your quality and stuff, but you also had phenomenal survey results and so on. So you obviously infested the building with a great culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I remember sitting through the first morning meeting, the first time I met you.
First time
in
at a
the building.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting through your morning meeting. I'm like, this is how a morning meeting should run.
Yeah.
Very organized, very resident focused, very much. And again, you're right. The whole team was around the table talking. It wasn't just the end table. You could tell like the end is where everybody sat that didn't get talked to. And then clinical always sat in the front.
Yeah.
Kind of like church, everybody sits in front. So it was very, very good culture.
And I think that's been kind of my challenge in where, elevating into roles. And I've been able to see it in some of the buildings, but is, how do I get that across? Like, how do we create that?
Right.
And that's been one of the more rewarding things for me in this role, is seeing the leaders in the buildings that I've been able to really latch onto and seeing them create that in their building, and hopefully we can get that across the board.
Yeah, it does change the trajectory of a company.
Yeah.
Because again, it really does then tie back to our mission. Because as we continue to strive for that level of excellence that we talk about, it's really that ownership at the facility level.
Yeah.
As an administrator, as a DNS, your leadership team really taking in and just cultivating that culture that we're all involved, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
The old song from, what movie is that?
High School Musical.
Yeah, High School Musical, yeah.
We're all in this together. So again, it goes back to that culture of how do we make sure everybody feels fully empowered to do the best that we can do for our residents, whether it's short rehab, dementia care, senior living, anything that we are offering, hospice care or any of it.
Yeah. We also have a plug here for one of our prior podcasts with Dr. Boise.
Yeah.
She talks a lot about inclusion and making people and residents and everyone, care team members alike, feeling safe, and very much what your leadership is like, Jordan. And we're all in this together. And,
absolutely. And I'm glad with you saying the resident, there's been times when I'll be in a building and, they're trying to figure out, the whole team is sitting around the table trying to figure out the fall intervention. And I'm like, have you talked to the resident?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
There you go. Let's include them,
Go to the source. Yeah, absolutely.
But I think, again, what's interesting, Jordan, is, or what is your perspective? Because you go into buildings, and again, when you're a title-driven company, title-driven being the VP of Ops just showed up, or the CEO just showed up, or the VP of Growth and Experience, it can become a culture of top-down. But when you go out in the facilities, are you seeing our culture being more of a culture of, we are in this together, versus a culture of, oh my gosh, Jordan just showed up. Now we have to put on this facade.
Right.
I feel like that we have done a great job of we're all in it together. Even on the clinical side of things, I see the nurse consultants very just hands-on and involved. The nurse consultant directors very involved as well. And I feel like the way they reach out to all of us shows that they feel that way. They feel like that we are involved and that we're not there to just tell them what they did wrong.
Right.
I get voicemails and text messages and calls sometimes, and I'm thinking, I would have never dreamed of asking someone, above me that, because I would have been scared to. But I'm glad that they feel like they can ask. Like, I think that shows the culture we've created because they're not scared to ask. I would have been scared because, hey, I did something wrong. I can't admit, I've just got to take care of it. I've got to figure it out. I've got to action plan it on my own. But these people are legitimately just asking, hey, what's your guidance on this? And I think that shows that we have that we're creating the culture that we want.
And that's very important because, again, nobody should look at a title.
No.
Because I always say at the end of the day, it's about our residents' care. And again, if I'm too scared to call Jordan, the VP of Ops, to ask this question, then I'm not doing justice for my resident.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
And I should feel confident to say, because again, there is no way, you already said, highly regulated, right?
Yes. Very.
The book is big.
Yeah.
There's no way we can know it all.
No.
But there's also experience.
Yeah. And, I'll get questions sometimes where I'm not real sure, but I know somebody who will know, so I'll call you back, and we'll reach out and ask the question and, get them an answer. So
there's a large company in our industry. It's the Ensign Group. And I've never worked in the company. I just know people that have, and they talk about the culture, but they call their home office the support center. And I always thought that resonated very well because, again, it's not a home office. It's not corporate. It's a support center.
That's really cool.
Support sounds very much more, I'm here to support you. And again, what I've heard in the industry, and again, I've worked in different areas. Well, the last company I worked for, there was a short time where the leaders in the region went out to the buildings, wrote on a piece of paper and left it.
Oh.
Or they always looked for the things that they did wrong. Or if the survey went south, instead of owning it as a whole, the region would just say, well, that's Chelsey's fault. She was the administrator and she didn't do her job as I told her to. We're all in it together here. It can't be we're pointing fingers, because that then erodes the culture, and then that puts the fear factor. Like, why would I call you? You don't have my back. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. If a CNA working a double shift right now, I love this question, could hear one thing from you, not advice, just one true thing, what would it be?
I would say take your time. Talk to your peers. Talk to your residents. Don't be so task-oriented. It's going to get done. It will get done.
Right.
Breathe. And just spend some time getting to know those that you're caring for and those that you're working with. Because I can say some of my best moments in my career have been at the bedside. And just whenever I was overwhelmed and thought I'm never going to make it through this shift. I think back to, going back to the floor during COVID and all the things that we had to do, thinking about that. But then those little moments of being able to provide the comfort or, just being there and being present and not rushing through, like that'll get you through it, and I think sometimes CNAs, they have the toughest job, of course. This call light's on, this, and they know they have to get through, but just if they would just stop and take time and realize how important they really are, I think that would get them through, a lot of it.
Yeah. I think so often we think that time spent with residents just being there for them or talking isn't productive, right?
But it is.
And it is.
Yeah.
It's interesting. This was way back in the therapy days. So we were trying to work on a patient's transferability. And I remember the way we wanted to show the team, they're like, this is going to take way too much time and so on and so forth. But it's amazing when you actually break it down and you do it. And to your point, if you were just to look at your watch and take 3 minutes,
right?
3 minutes isn't that long.
No.
In just that 3 minutes, you would be surprised of what the impact you could have on a resident's life or on your own, where you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed. And I think sometimes we make it into this big, grandiose thing. If it literally is just sitting there for 3 minutes and just saying, how are you? How was your day? I think people would be completely shocked. There's been studies around physicians that you could have the same 2 physicians, you could do the same thing, but one sat down and did 3 minutes personal conversation and the other was more medical. Same time, everything's the same except for that 3 minutes. You would walk out thinking, I had the best experience with the one physician just for 3 minutes.
The time's going to pass regardless.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that goes across the board, no matter what role you're doing,
Right.
As an operator, as the clinician, just that human contact and that time of just making an impact and getting to know that person. And, I've talked with administrators that'll tell me, that they just have to get out of their office. I'm like, do it. Go on the floor, and they're overwhelmed with financials or they're overwhelmed and they'll say, I've just got to step away. I'm going out on the floor for a while. And then I talk to them, the next day or a little bit later, and they're like, that's the best thing I could have done.
Correct.
I needed to go.
Agree.
I had to go back to the, and get to the bedside. And I'm like, well, that's why you do what you do.
Yeah.
That's your why. So I think we get so just overwhelmed with tasks sometimes.
Well, it's interesting. If we go back to Dr. Bosey's podcast, so she was talking about, she was early in her residency, I think it was.
My gosh, yeah.
And she was saying, she's, I forget, she was sleeping or whatever. So the nurse came in, woke her up and said, this patient wanted to speak to her. So she went into this whole medical thing. Like she went to the thing and she was researching all the diagnosis, everything. Because she's like, I don't know what this patient wants.
Yeah.
So went in there and literally she's like, it was completely night and day. She didn't want to know about the diagnosis. She wanted to know, like, do you think I should marry my boyfriend?
Oh.
And so it gave her that moment. But to what you're saying, they don't need another diagnosis. They don't need another person telling them, here's all your contraindications for this. Sometimes they just need someone just to be a person and just meet them where they're at and just say, you know what? They could have a terminal diagnosis. You know what? This sucks.
Yeah.
And that's okay to say it. And it's okay to sympathize. And my daughter is going to be a nurse, as you guys know. And when she was making that decision, my daughter has the biggest heart. She's going to go through some trials.
Absolutely.
With a big heart. But she said, what if I fall down or what if I start crying with a patient? Because she wants to do OB. She's already she loves the baby side of things. But I said, then you cry.
Yeah.
It's okay.
It's okay. But in her mind, she has this image that she's supposed to be show up differently. And it's like, no, that's not what your patient wants.
No.
They want to know someone cares.
Yeah.
And see, what you're saying is take a deep breath. Because guess what? If that doesn't get done, there's another shift. It's 24/7, 365. And as long as we're all working through it together, hey, Jordan, I didn't get to this because I was sitting with Chelsey and I was trying to help her through this situation. So I didn't get all my wastebasket empty.
What's the one thing you wish more people understood about what it takes to lead people well in long-term care?
I would say connections and relationships matter so much. Take the time to get to know your coworkers. Take the time, like we were saying earlier, reach out if you don't know. But I think that we are in our industry, you have to rely on it. It's very stressful, highly regulated, like we said. There are situations that we've all been in that we would have never gotten through them if we didn't have that person, to reach out to. And I feel like Majestic is we are very blessed. We have some insanely smart folks that work with us and that we get to work with every day, and those connections are just, they're invaluable. Just reach out to them and ask for advice and ask for direction and be able to take, constructive criticism from those folks. They're where they're at for a reason. So I think that in long-term care, just being able to, and it seems like everything comes full circle. You see people again, like everybody ends up working together again in some, capacity. So connect with people.
Get to know. You can get so much more done when you're locked in arms.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, I feel that the same way. Like I was telling someone the other day, like I would put this team against anyone. It's
phenomenal when you look across from, kind of where we've been with folks in certain roles and then look at who we have and the information they are able to provide you and the guidance they are able to provide you. It's unreal.
What's interesting is I always say you'll never meet truly, and it kind of echoes what you're saying, a more compassionate, resident-centric group of leaders. And again, yes, there's the financials, there's the regulatory, there's all that we're up against in that. But I have not yet seen where nobody has put the resident first.
Absolutely.
And they're, trying to make the decisions or trying to do what's best for the organization, because it's like, how is this going to really impact the resident? And that speaks volumes to me, because it's a culture then. It really is about the resident.
Even on the, the operation side with Dave and, his thing, we have to provide good care. You have to provide quality care. That's where it starts, and I feel like that is the consensus across the board. We have to do what's right and we have to provide great care.
Right.
Then everything else, we'll worry about it. But that's the basis of what we do.
Absolutely.
I would agree.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you would like our listeners to know or hear today?
The only thing I would say is to kind of sum up, again, kind of what Jordan started with at the beginning is, for the listeners listening, just know that long-term care is a true career. Again, I value all my colleagues throughout the industry, whether it's hospital, outpatient. Everyone is faced with their own challenges and their passions. But long-term care is more than just pushing pills down a hallway. It's more than just the image that you say when people say nursing homes and they cringe. It is an industry that you get to meet a senior at a level of their lives that you can truly make such a profound impact. Get to know their lives, get to know their journeys. Think about your grandparents, being able to just sit with them and hear their stories. You get to do that all day long with our seniors. You get to learn their stories. You get to understand about what their lives are. And my wife and I were talking because, again, grew up with big families, and my wife's parents are 79 and 82, I think. But my wife's just like, I wish there was a way I could record everything they're telling me.
Yeah.
Because right now, like with her dad, there's just her dad and her aunt left. So again, when they pass away, like who knows those stories? You know what a witch's pot is? Those big brew. So my mother-in-law has one, and I use this to learn people's stories. My wife just always thought it was something that they just got. She didn't. Well, it was actually her grandmother's.
Oh, wow.
That they used to put it on top of a tire and build a fire underneath it so that they could heat it up. Well, this is kind of gross. So they could put the chickens in it so they could pluck the feathers.
Oh, wow. That's definitely a way.
But, again, if she didn't take the time to sit, and again, that's the opportunity in long-term care. You get to sit and learn all these different things about our residents and what it was like in the Depression or what it was like growing up in those times. And again, you'll never be able to experience that in a history class.
No.
And I think too, like for me, I was younger, didn't appreciate the stuff, hearing the stories from my grandparents like I should have. Like now, I would love to hear those stories again.
Yes, I would agree.
You know, so it's kind of an opportunity too to, you know, I guess kind of right your wrongs in a way and make those connections and hear those stories that you may have been too busy at one point to do. You know, like I was saying, it is a specialty, and I don't think people realize that.
Yeah.
It molds you, it changes who you are. And I don't think I would ever want to go back to working in a hospital setting where I was so focused on, you know, like I said, hanging blood or, you know, that it's just, there's so much more to care than that, you know, in my opinion. And you see that in long-term care.
Do you ever find, like when you're out in the community and you're at an event or you're in a restaurant or something, you see somebody, an elderly person, but your sensors are more heightened, like, okay, are they going to be okay? Are they safe?
Yes.
Do I need to step in and help them, or they're going to get in a car and it's like, do I need to help you? Or
and I'm even like at church, you know, there's some elderly, and I'm like, Jeremy, do you need to help them? You know, that's my mind goes there too. You know, it's like that's our job. We have to protect all the time. You know.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So that's what I've noticed anymore is like we could be out and about. It's just like this instant protected mode. Like, okay, who do I need to help here and stuff? So,
you know, and you think about it, when they're in our care, a lot of times they're in a traumatic, they had this home and now they're in this room and, you know, and sometimes, you know, well, so-and-so's not interacting. Well, maybe they're depressed, you know, let's see what we can do to make their whole life has changed.
Exactly.
Yeah. You took, you know, again, I'll use my mom. You know, we didn't have a big house at all growing up, but we definitely had bigger than up to 100 square foot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
she had her own space.
She had her own space. She had her own nuances, her own little idiosyncrasies she would do. And then to say, no, now you have to fall within these four walls.
Yeah.
You know, now the unfortunate part was my mom had dementia and stuff, so it was probably a little bit easier for her to adapt into that. But again, to your point, the fear, the giving up your life, what you had, what you owned.
Yeah. I had a resident at a facility I was at that would sit in his room and he would cry because they had this huge farm that he had to give up. It was a brand new facility. So and then he would say, this is beautiful, but this is not what I worked my whole life for.
Right.
You know, so it was that, you know, realization for him of where he was at now. And his mind was completely there. He just physically couldn't care for himself anymore.
Yeah.
And it was just sad. And the staff there was great about, you know, trying to get him out of his room and stuff. But it was, you know, trying to find what would be beneficial for him and what would make him happy again. It was really sad, you know, to see that.
Yeah. Now on the other side that's the blessing we have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is how do we help them in that time of despair to where it's like, you know what, your life isn't ending, it's just starting. Like you get a whole new chapter and we'll help you write the chapter and we'll try to do it as big as we can. But again, that goes back to how do we bring in restorative? How do we bring in activities? How do we all show up differently? Right. To bring in that environment to where I always say that your room becomes your bedroom, but the rest of these walls become your home. Nobody sits in their room 24/7 and eat in the room and that. So here's the dining room, here's the activity room, here's a multi-purpose room. How do we start driving those to be their home? I always say the greatest thing would be to walk in a building and be like, where's Mrs. So-and-so? Well, let's see, she has art therapy, then she's going to go down to restorative. She'll be back at noon for lunch. Yeah. And we have to pass her noon meds, and then she's back out because her calendar is full.
I love that.
That brings me to a story. I had an aunt that was in a facility, and she was at Greenville. And when my mother-in-law would go, she'd say, she's never in her room. Yeah. I don't know where she's at. She's she's always busy. Yeah. And awesome. That was the best compliment to me. You know, that's what we want. Yeah.
Right. Your life isn't ending.
No, she loved it. She had friends. She had her little group, you know, and when she got to go home, they were all sad. They missed her, you know. So that's what we want.
That's what we want. That is absolutely what we want, to embrace that type of culture to where it's a home, not just a place to go and have your last days.
Yeah, I would agree. Beautiful last ending. Well, thank you for tuning in to Hearts of Excellence. Jordan's journey is a reminder that the people who care for our most vulnerable community members often started exactly where the work needed them most, and that staying open to where that work leads can take you further than you've ever imagined. If you're interested in learning more about the culture at Majestic Care or want to find out more about our career opportunities, visit majesticare.com/contact us. If you or a loved one needs care, reach out to us. We're here to support your next chapter. Talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to Hearts of Excellence. To learn more about becoming a care team member or how we can support your loved ones, visit majesticcare.com. And don't forget to follow and share, because every story deserves to be heard.